And we can advance to the next slide. So I mentioned that a lot of my work is in community engagement, so I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to also say that community engaged research is another form of team science. And you can see on the slide one of the traditional definitions of community engagement, and it sounds, very much like the definition I gave you of team science, working collaboratively with groups, and those groups can be defined in many ways, be it by where they live, what they're interested in, what health conditions or environmental situations they live within. And people define themselves as communities, and that's an important part, that the researchers don't define the communities, communities define themselves. And so community engagement is another form of team science where we understand the dependence of the research project on the inclusion and the knowledge base that the community brings. Next slide. And so community engagement does bring some specific benefits. And of course, I do a whole full hour presentation on that and be happy to share that with anyone who's interested in learning more. But some of the benefits of engagement of teams in general, and particularly community engaged research teams, is that it helps to address those complex health problems, again, because we may get a new conceptualization of what the problem is. So having that community vantage point, we may think that the problem with diabetes is that there's a lack of access to healthy foods in our neighborhoods. But you might listen to community members that live in particular neighborhoods that are sometimes termed food deserts, and they could say, maybe it's not a lack of access, the food is there, but maybe it's not affordable. Or, and this has been said, that buying, fresh fruits and vegetables may not be economically feasible, not because it's not accessible, or even, there may be resources to help people stretch their budgets, but if you can't consume the food quickly enough and it spoils, then that is not good for people's bottom line in terms of their budget. So you might walk in with the concept that it's because there's a food desert and we need to bring more grocery stores to a neighborhood. And while that might be true, the community engagement piece can give you more information about the nature of the problem and could change, again, our concept as well as how we approach the problem. So that's one of the key benefits and the goals of community engagement, is to make sure that research is directly informed by the individuals who are impacted most directly by the problems. And that with that, it can help with the design and implementation of a research project, and it helps to increase what we call the external validity of the project. It means that the work can then have value in the external world as well as in our nicely defined research settings. And then it can also make sure that the data are going to be more useful to the individuals who need to use the data to make action and change in their environment. Next slide. And just a few more benefits. I'll just highlight the biggest one on this slide, which is trust, especially when we're talking about clinical and community research. Especially things like clinical trials, there has to be a level of trust for people to be involved and to contribute data to the research. And so using community engagement as an approach to our science, even if it's at the basic science level, can have very many far-reaching benefits. So we can go on to the next slide. And this is just an illustration which many of you may have seen in different contexts, but it relates to what we're trying to accomplish, that if we bring our teams together and we work and really understand the problem collectively, then we can get to a much more efficient and often cost-effective solution. Next slide. So now I'm going to switch gears and talk about the virtual world that we're now living in one way, shape, or form, and how to work most effectively with virtual teams. So this is just to illustrate that in the olden days, we'd all come together physically as a team and, shake hands, have face-to-face interactions, but now we all just have to give that air high five or internet high five. And so there are things that we need to think about to make sure that our virtual teams work well. And we can go to the next slide. So first, in any team, we have to start off with team building. And this goes for virtual or in person. And team building is really about just getting to know each other. We've all participated probably in some version of a team building exercise. Some of them work better than others, but it's really about getting to know each other. And you don't really have to build in specific exercises. It's really about building in time to have conversations with your team members, especially if it's a brand new team that's coming together or new members are joining the team. You want to make sure that time is built to get to know each other, both professionally as well as some aspects of our personal lives, because that gives context, especially when we're working with teams that cut across not only social cultures, but as well as our professional and scientific cultures. And with that, we want to also make sure that we're taking time to assure that our team has a shared vision and that we share guiding principles about our work. And sometimes it's important to just sit down and have explicit conversations about what the goals are and let everybody express their understanding of the goal and make sure that there is consensus before a new team really moves forward. And even if you're part of an existing team, it's always good to check in with each other and do that as an ongoing basis to make sure that we know what's going on in the lives of our team members, and also to check in on whether or not we're all still on the same page in terms of the vision. And that's critically important because teams evolve over time. And so it's important that we make sure that we're all on the same page. And so we can do that explicitly. And I do recommend in building your agendas for your meetings, and this was a recommendation made to me, is build in time just for people to talk. And sometimes we get very task focused and people can feel like we're not using our time wisely, but it is a wise use of time to build in 5 or 10 minutes during a 1-hour meeting just for the team to have that interaction, and to then periodically build in time where we step back and relook at our team vision and our team goals and have explicit discussions about those as well as about the principles through which we operate. Next slide. And then checking in, and this again can be ongoing through our weekly or monthly meetings that we have with our team. So checking in as a group, but particularly members checking in one-on-one, and in particular team leaders, making sure that we take the time to check in one-on-one with our team members. And that could be to make sure that, again, there's clear understanding, to see if people are having specific problems or challenges that need to be addressed. And then again, knowing what's going on with people so we have that context of why, certain activities may be behind schedule or maybe having other challenges. And so it's really in any team science and community engagement as well, we always say it boils down to a relationship. So the same activities that we do to maintain our personal relationships can be translated in many ways to our team science environments. And it's important, especially for those new interdisciplinary teams that bring people from different scientific backgrounds, and especially when we're bringing people in who may not have a particular scientific background, that we make sure that we clarify our terms. And a good rule of thumb is to really avoid the acronyms and some of the jargon that we tend to use, so that everybody knows what we mean by certain terminology, until such point as the team really has gelled and you're all using the same language. And then understanding, as I mentioned, differences in culture, and that could be the cultures that we literally grew up in and that we live in, but also each scientific discipline has its own culture. And so it's important to understand that as well. And we have to share those explicitly because we can't make assumptions about what people know about our expectations within our scientific fields. Next slide. And role clarity and goal clarity obviously is important. And so in the team building process, again, if you haven't done this at the outset, or if you haven't done it with your team in a while, there's always a good time to sit down, take that step back, and get clear on how we're operating. So we want to know, what are our goals? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Make sure we're all still sharing that vision, and then getting clear on who is responsible for what. Now, doing that at the outset obviously is ideal, but as things shift, especially if team members come and go, we need to be clear on what the role expectations are. It's very useful to know when certain things are expected and what tasks are expected to be done by which members. And then also the processes. That's the how the work gets done. And there may be some standards of practice that you want to set within your team. And that would vary, of course, by the type of project and discipline. But I think what happens is we just start working together, and we don't take a step back to just think about building that team relationship. And the value of that time spent is that, when you encounter challenges at some point, and every team encounters challenges, you've laid a really good foundation and you have some really good processes to fall back on. So anytime is a good time to sit back and take a look at these issues with your team, even if your team has been working together, for decades. And I have teams like that we have literally worked together for 10, 15 years or more. But it's a good idea to do a check-in every once in a while. And in planning how you're going to approach the work, always keep it simple. You don't want to have overly complicated processes. If your team is very large, then it makes sense to then divide teams into smaller groups. And when you have your regular team meetings, and there's different kind of inflection points for your team, you can have what's considered an after action review. And that means that it's just a time, again, to step back, reflect, and figure out how you want to go forward to make some improvements and enhancements with your team. So, again, I don't think I'm saying anything that's particularly novel. It's just that, again, I do this all day, every day, and these aren't things that I always put into practice. So I'm kind of preaching to myself here to say that, I need to look at my own teams, look at the last time we checked in. When was the last time we actually clarified our goals? Are we really clear and comfortable with where we are with everyone's role? And part of that is also evaluating the team for performance. And I'll talk about that in a later slide. We can go to the next slide. And obviously, as I said, relationships, these teams are really a form of relationship. And if you read any relationship book, you know that communication is always going to be that core key factor. And so some tips for communication within teams, make it routine. So what becomes a problem is when the communications are sporadic. It's not that it's not intentional that people don't want to communicate, but we just haven't established a routine by which, there's a weekly, email that kind of summarizes where the team is, or there's a monthly report that everybody contributes to, or there's a quarterly meeting that we all attend. You need to make sure that every team should have some type of regularly scheduled communication time via email, some type of technology communication, in person or virtually. Again, I mentioned in your agendas, make sure you build in time for interaction, but you should have an agenda for each of your, formal interactions, such as meetings or workshops. And you want to make sure that that information is summarized, and that goes back to communication. Make sure that each meeting ends with a summary. And again, that keeps everybody on the same page as to what we expect to do, who's expected to do it, and when it's expected to happen. Of course, think about our etiquette and web etiquette and Zoom meeting norms and all of that. I think we've all gotten used to that by now. But sometimes, especially with new team members, and maybe when you have newer members or student members, you just want to set those norms so that people feel comfortable. So some meetings, for example, it's okay to have lunch. You may have a Zoom meeting by lunch. Others may be more formal. So you want to communicate that to people so that everyone feels comfortable and they know, how to comport themselves. There are lots of obviously great collaborations platforms out there now. Howard uses Teams, there's Google, there's just tons of everything out there now. And they offer some great resources. If you're not getting the references to the photos here that I've selected, the top picture is from the movie Kingsman. And if you've ever seen the movie, there's a scene in which the members of the Kingsmen put on these special glasses, and the glasses then create a virtual environment where everybody looks and feels like they're sitting around the same table. While that does sound like science fiction, it's not that far off, because there are companies that are coming up with virtual environments where our avatars can participate in meetings, and that's the second picture that you see there. And so that technology will be emerging over time and make us feel like we are in the same room to some extent. But then you see the other picture there, and some of you may be too young to recognize what the picture is, but that is an actual telephone. And sometimes the simplest form of communication is the best. So whatever collaborations platforms that you're selecting from, really always value function over the form and the features. So, you know, a platform can offer lots of, you know, bells and whistles, but, you know, sometimes you just need a simple communication. Excuse me, sorry about that. Next slide. And so, but it is important to have a platform that you can track the progress of the team. And one benefit of this is to know where you are with your goals, but also it helps give individual team members accountability. And one of the issues that we often have in teams is maybe, you know, the work is not evenly distributed. And so I personally do like, you know, whenever possible, to have an objective means of tracking the progress for the team. And so the top is just a very simple spreadsheet that I started using many years ago. You can see from the dates, where we just use, you know, traffic signals: red, yellow, green. Green means everything's on track. Yellow means, you know, we need to attend to, you know, some things that may be falling behind. And then red means that we're not on target. And so something simple as visual as that can just help the team then hone in on what is the challenge and how do we address it. And then I did try for a while a more high-tech platform, and that's what you're seeing at the bottom. This one is called Week Done. You may have heard of Monday.com. There's literally 100 of them at least out there that are different, you know, productivity tools that you can use with teams. Microsoft has its own version that's actually integrated into the Howard platform, but it's not. I've tried it. I didn't find it as facile and easy to use as some of the things that are on the external market. But the bottom line is, I liked one platform because it gave me some indicators, these dial indicators that tell me kind of the health of the overall project and the productivity of individual team members. And ideally, you want every team member to take accountability for their work and to use their own metrics for self-development. But sometimes if you're the team leader, you will have to do some coaching. And it is often good to have some objective measures to which you can link your coaching discussions. Next slide. And so one aspect of teams is that you want to develop not only, you know, full accountability among team members, but the concept that each team member brings an aspect of leadership with them. And so you want people to take, if you want people to be accountable, people have to take ownership of their aspect of the work. And so that means making sure, again, everybody has their clearly assigned roles and responsibilities. We have norms for how we give feedback to one another, and that means everyone can be a leader. So even if there is a PI for the project, that members of the team should feel comfortable giving feedback to that PI as the leader. And I can say, and this is not brown nosing in any way, it's very true that Dr. Sutherland is that type of PI where any member of the RCMI team can give feedback about what works and, you know, what could be improved. And that information is taken to heart. And that's what we mean by shared leadership. It doesn't mean that, you know, there's a leadership council per se. It just means that every member has a leadership role for their aspect of the project. And you want to assure that, and that really assures that, you know, teams can be highly productive. One thing that I didn't mention in this presentation, I may get to it, I think I'll get to it in a later slide, is that teams are a little bit slower in terms of productivity compared to individual investigators, because we do have to meet, we do have to build some consensuses around things, and so that can take some extra time. Make sure when you're bringing in new team members that you orient them and mentor them well. And then make sure that those collective goals are elevated. And so I talk about, going to a conference as a team, not just as you as an individual investigator, but we're going as a team to present. And we're trying to highlight, for example, the way RCMI does, we're trying to highlight the work of the entire team in addition to those individuals. And, valuing the diverse thoughts that members bring to the discussion. Next slide. So teams are not perfect. So I've painted a world of great communication, great interactions, high productivity, really interesting, complex, innovative science. But, teams do have conflicts. And so I'm just going to address a couple of them, not to say this is all conflicts that exist, but just a few. And in science in particular, authorship is one that comes up as a common conflict. So that's something that you want to work out with your team, to just have a framework early on. You can't always have hard and fast rules about authorship because manuscripts and presentations evolve, and one person may start off leading the manuscript, but it may turn out that another individual ends up doing the lion's share of the work. And so an initial authorship plan may have to be amended, but you need to have within your team, and your journals can help you with this, because sometimes journals have guidelines, particularly about authorship in general, but we know that oftentimes when we submit, we have to say what each person did. And in doing that, that can kind of help you understand the contributions. In one of the talks I do on team science, I do talk about attribution bias. And that just means that sometimes I know what I did and how I contributed to the team. But if we don't have really good team processes, I may not know exactly what you did and what your contribution is. So I may not place the right level of value on what you're doing. And so that's, again, why it's so important to have that good communication within the team. I think if someone can mute their microphone, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and that will be conversations you could have, and have some guidelines that are set at the beginning, but there need to be flexible ways to apply those guidelines. And of course, teams are there to generate more output. And so you can divide the work into multiple papers and have different roles and different leaderships on those papers and presentations. And make sure that, particularly, students and early stage faculty have the opportunity to present and to lead the writing for your teams. And recognize the idea of recognizing effort independent of outcome. So what that means is every experiment or project may not result in an outcome that leads to a stellar paper or presentation, but a lot of effort went into getting that null finding. And so it's important to make sure that we recognize the effort that people are making, in addition to those that come out with findings, that end up, written into top journals. And make sure that we credit all of our team members, and everyone, I think, is accustomed to that when we present and we acknowledge our teams. Next slide. Other conflicts that we may have, every team member is not going to be a keeper, and that's just honest. So it's important to have those honest conversations, and it may mean that the individual may have specific challenges that can be rectified, and sometimes there are challenges that can't be rectified. And those are the hard conversations. So again, building up those relationships early on, setting those expectations, having some objective data can help with these conversations. And of course, you want to coach, go back, make sure communication of the expectations is clear. And then whatever we're doing, we want to focus on the science of it and not the personality. There are going to be personality conflicts, and that's where you would need my other hat as a psychologist. That's really not part of team science. If you have personal conflicts, then you need to deal with the personal issues that are creating those conflicts. So the teamwork really needs to stay focused on the science. And that's part of our professionalism. And I'm sure since we're in a professional development conference, we're all aware of that. But sometimes, emotions get high. You know, we're invested in what we do, and sometimes personalities and emotions can play into it. So it's important to be able to separate those out. And when we're having someone in a team who maybe doesn't produce, we want to make sure we're focused on the science and not on the individual's personal characteristics. And sometimes research changes direction, and that means that some team members may not move forward with the next phase of the research. So these are things that we want to have conversations about in a very, you know, sensitive way. And we want to maintain those relationships. And I've had this happen where one of our team members was not able to continue as a core team member. It was that person's individual choice, but we wanted to retain a relationship, and we continue to work with her as a consultant from time to time. Next slide. And then institutionally, if you're working on, you know, a funded project or what have you, and you just can't resolve the problems within the team, our institution does have resources that can help us. We have our grievance committee. I believe there is still a faculty ombudsman position. And sometimes, you know, you may have to go even further, especially when you have teams that are inter-institutional. And I haven't talked about that at all, but, you know, sometimes you have to have the university step in for you if the conflict is really between the two institutions. You don't want to try to battle that out yourself. You want to bring in the institutional resources to support you with that. And that goes to things like intellectual property. Next slide. So let's go to the next slide. So I normally stop and do an exercise, and I'm happy to send out a link. If you've never assessed your own conflict management style, it's good to know that. It's good to know where you sit and then what goals you may have for enhancing your own conflict management style. So these are the 5 styles, and I always take a poll, and I think people can put in the chat. So before we go to the next slide, if folks wouldn't mind just typing into the chat which of these 5 styles, accommodating, avoiding, collaborating, competing, compromising, which one do you think is your style based on what you know about yourself? And you can see here the definitions. That accommodating, it means that we give a little bit more than we get in return. And many of us are like that, and I probably would put myself in that category in some instances. And it can vary from place to place. We all may have kind of a style that we go to. You know, some it may be better just to avoid, you know, conflicts, and I do that from time to time as well. And it is okay if the issue is trivial. We don't want to get into an unnecessary conflict over something that really is not important. And when we do have conflicts, rather than avoiding, it can be useful to allow time for the tensions to diffuse before we go back and try to address that issue. So each of these has its role. And you can see here that competing is when we're trying to get, you know, what we think is the most important thing for us, and maybe that takes something away from someone else. And in the compromise, we often think as the compromise as the target, but sometimes compromise is really a lose-lose endeavor, that neither party gets what we need out of the interaction. And so really the goal for conflict management is the win-win, the collaboration. And that's hard to get to. And again, we can use any of these at times when we need them, because sometimes I need to compete. Sometimes I need to get something specific that I think is critical to the team, and that's okay. But it shouldn't be my always go-to style. So the win-win is what we're always, you know, trying to achieve. And I see folks here, you know, largely have a collaborative style. So that's great. And what collaboration does is it really involves listening and making room for the different perspectives and figuring out how to achieve all the goals or optimal goals as much as possible. And again, if you go back to my early definitions around team science, collaboration requires novel solutions, especially when there's limited resources. To collaborate, we have to come up with a different way of doing the work. And you can see there that it takes time. It can be very time consuming, and sometimes that's why teams kind of scatter, because it takes a while to get to that point where we are working collaboratively. So thanks everyone for participating. I appreciate the interaction here in the chat. So we can go to the next slide. And this is just a different conceptualization of that. And so you can see that when we're talking about styles, you can think of it on X and Y axis continuum. So, and again, we want to be right in the middle of being cooperative, but yet assertive. And that's what, sorry, this slide is incorrect. Collaboration should be in the center. I never noticed that before. Collaboration should be in the center and compromise should be in the other box. And that's what we're trying to get to, is a happy medium of cooperating with our team members and asserting for what we need to be successful within that team. And I think that can be applied to just about any area of our lives. Next slide. And so for early career faculty, team science does have, some pitfalls that we need to be aware of. Because as an early career scientist, your goal is to get known as a leader in your field. And so if you're in a very large team with lots of very senior, highly productive faculty, your work could easily not be seen as much as would be ideal. So just understand that going in and balance. There's a lot of balances here, balancing your independence versus being part of a team, and making sure that you have opportunities to lead and that your leadership results in presentations where you are identified as the lead or primary author. And then, to what extent are you the PI of record versus you're a member of a team where you're leading perhaps a core, and the extent to which your institution recognizes and values your role on a team versus your role as the PI or PD of record. And then-
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can I make a comment here?
Absolutely, Dr. Johnson.
Because this is a very important slide in relation to mentorship, because under the best conditions, early career faculty should not have to worry about that if they have a mentor looking out for them. And maybe that's something that we should save for a different presentation. But the responsibility that a mentor has, such that the early career person doesn't have to worry about being in the background, is crucial and fundamental to good mentoring.
Well said, Dr. Johnson. Appreciate that comment. And if you're not seeing that in your career development, I think that's why RCMI is doing these types of activities. Then definitely reach out. And we have different types of mentors. We have our scientific mentors, our career and professional mentors. So you should be able to go to someone else if a problem is happening in another arena and get that addressed. And in that, you should then be able to make sure that if as you're developing your own research, that your letters that will go into your promotion packet really clearly distinguish your role and your significant intellectual contributions to the team, and demonstrate that you indeed are a leader in your field, even if you have been working largely in a team science environment. Okay. I think my time is just about up. I think I have a couple more slides, so let's get through those. So sometimes you may want to have some guidelines and some guiding documents for your practice of team science. These don't have to be extensive, but just you want your team to have thought through some things. I'm not really big into charters and bylaws and all of that, but just to have like a one-page, standards and expectations of how we're going to work together. And so these are kind of some of the things that you can think about that will go into a document such as that. So, understanding, where this project ends. Every project doesn't continue forever. So, just making that clear and explicit. And we talked about the contributions and accountabilities, what is the process for managing personnel within this team? And importantly, who has access to the data and under what circumstances, where is it stored, when can we get access to it, especially for those who are basic scientists dealing with biological samples. That should be something that should be explicitly laid out. Next slide. So I think Ms. Clark is up next. Before I yield over to her, and I think it's a great segue, and I think we're going to take questions at the end. If Crystal, if you could pull up the OneDrive document. So COVID, I hate to start every sentence these days with COVID, but because of the pandemic, a lot of funding opportunities came out very, very quickly. And it was really hard to even get a handle on what was out there and who would be good teams to respond to the various opportunities. So I took some time to just try to organize that. And as I was organizing those responses for COVID-19 research opportunities, it dawned on me that institutionally, it would be a great resource to just be able to visualize what's out there in terms of research opportunities and to then build teams around that. So on OneDrive, Crystal's bringing it up now, this is an accessible document, and I think RCMI has the link and can send out the link. I think Ms. Clark has the link. It's a living document so that you could go through the document. And so in the bottom, we can put down different topics. So because I work in cancer, I filled out one for cancer. If you're a diabetes researcher, you could create one of these for diabetes. As you can see, there's a COVID-19 component there that hasn't probably been updated in a while. And again, it's a living document, so anyone can go in and they can not only add, or you can see across the top the content, you can add what the funding opportunity is, who the sponsor is, if it's a supplement, what the target grant is. I put in just so people can see a general aim, so they kind of know if it's in their target area, some examples of the specific types of projects. And then this is where the team building comes in. If you want to be a lead for a particular project, you can put yourself in. I put myself in for a couple of projects, and then we can build collaborators. If you continue to scroll over, we can build collaborators. We need key staff that can support projects. And you can see here for the one project that I submitted, I have my key staff there. Obviously the due dates are important, and the cost of the projects, some of the basic logistics, and then put the link there so that anybody interested could then see the link, go to it, and see if they wanted to add themselves as a collaborator to your project. It wouldn't be just about adding yourself to the list, but reaching out to the person listed as the principal investigator and say, hey, this is an interest of mine, I'd like to potentially talk with you about collaboration. So I think it's a work in progress, but just thinking about a way that we can all share a platform for sharing this information, know who's interested in what, and start to build new teams. So with that, I thank you for the time to present, and I will yield to Ms. Clark, and I guess we can do questions at the end or via the chat. I'd be happy to answer questions via the chat as well. So Ms. Clark, you're muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pamela Clark. I am the Director of the Office of Research Development within the overall Office of Research. And our office is the central repository for the research enterprise in terms of pre- and post-award functions. As most of you may know, the other unit within the Office of Research is Research Administrative Services. So I'm going to give a quick overview of some specific COVID-19 opportunities. I will have follow-up with anyone who is specifically interested in NIH and non-NIH funding in regards to COVID. Our office specifically provides funding opportunities from a array of sponsors, ranging from federal agencies to foundations and corporate. I will also talk about portals within NIH. If you're, let's say, a faculty member who is specifically interested in vaccine development, there are opportunities where you can submit information there for consideration. And I'm going to talk about how you can research current COVID-19 research grant funding, which is very important to see what has been funded by the agency, and then some specific additional COVID-19 funding opportunities outside of the NIH and NIH resources in general. Next slide. Next. So in each slide, I listed the link to the opportunities. NIH, in response to the COVID, has done a really great job in terms of targeting specific opportunities. For instance, they have what's called administrative supplements, meaning that you can submit a non-competing award that provides additional funding to a currently funded NIH grant to meet increased costs, specifically in regards to COVID-specific research. If you click on the link here, it would pull up all the institutes within the NIH that actually provide funding specifically to COVID. That would include, like I said, administrative supplements. It would include specific responses to the emergency revisions, and it would include responses to the urgent competing revisions. So all of you should be able to save this link. I would recommend that you check it regularly, because what the NIH has done is that they literally update it on a weekly basis, because they are continuously adding funding opportunities. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I know we have several faculty on campus who are doing research that they're looking at diagnostic therapies for COVID-19. They're either in early stage development for vaccines, or maybe probably have a vaccine that was developed for some other virus and they want to see if it is applicable to COVID-19, or they have a therapeutic or some type of technology. So this is not a solicitation, but what NIH has done, they've created a database that you can go into and put your information in there in terms of what you've developed or what your idea is, and then they can match you to potential either other persons who are working on vaccine research within the NIH or elsewhere. The one caveat that I recommend before you do this is that you consult with our intellectual property marketing specialist. His name is Terry Adams, and I can provide his name to those who would be interested, because this would allow you to make sure that you have like an NDA, or at least the university is aware of your idea before you submit it to the NIH. But this is good because there are a lot of different companies who are working on vaccines, as most of you may know, for COVID-19. And the NIH has basically created a central repository to collect that data in terms of saying, okay, these are the types of research that are going on, and if there are any specific opportunities that come up within the NIH or from other companies, that they can direct you towards it. Next slide. So NIH has a portal called the NIH Report, and this is also a great resource because what it does, it provides all information on NIH funding. So if you click on this link, generally you can look for information on NIH grants that have been awarded based on the institution, the PI. It's a great place to look for collaborative researchers. Let's say you're looking at to answer a specific research question, and you may not find someone within the university as a collaborator. You can search this to find current collaborators. But what NIH has done since the COVID pandemic, in addition to having a general database of all NIH-funded projects, the specific institutes, etc., they have a curated list of all faculty, researchers, and staff who have received COVID-19 funding since March 2020, right? So you can access this link and look for people to see, okay, I want to submit an administrative supplement, or I want to submit a urgent competitive revision type of grant, but I'm not sure what they've funded. So this will give you access to that. You can search by keyword, you can search by the study section that's reviewing, and you can search for the specific interest. For example, if you're submitting a supplement for COVID-19, and I can provide a list on request of all our current NIH-funded projects to see which projects you can use to submit a supplement. This information can also provide information on who's been awarded from other institutions. And this is a good practice because in general, when you're submitting an application for a grant, there are two things that you should always do. You should always provide a one-page summary of your idea to the program officer and have a conversation to make sure it's in alignment with their funding interests. And you should always look and see what has been awarded based on your research area, based on the institute, etc. So that's what this is what that resource does for you. Next slide. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the role of our office is to provide funding opportunities from all federal agencies, philanthropic sector, etc. So what I have done is I've listed a current list of active COVID-19 funding opportunities outside of the NIH. For example, and these are all active links, so once you share the slides, you'll be able to access them. The National Science Foundation, and we actually had, I think, 2 faculty members who submitted and were awarded in the College of Engineering at Howard. They submitted to the NSF Rapid Award, which basically they were able to get money to do COVID-19 research regarding COVID-19 and water treatment, right? The Robert Wood Foundation also has opportunities available. The Russell Sage Foundation, which we've had at least 2 awardees from Howard University who are junior faculty in the Department of Economics, they also have a current opportunity. So what I want people to understand is that COVID-19 research is not just geared towards the NIH and the biomedical. There are opportunities for people, as Dr. Williams was talking about, team science approach, interdisciplinary science. A lot of agencies, they're taking their current solicitations that were available to a specific area and asking faculty members to submit research that is relevant to the COVID-19 pandemic. It could be from a biomedical research, it could be from a racial equity standpoint, it could be from a vaccine development standpoint. So it's very important that when you're looking for COVID-19 responses, don't think that you're just limited to one specific agency. A lot of agencies have developed opportunities that we can all apply for. Next slide. So the last slide that I wanted to discuss with you was just overall NIH resources. And at the end of this, I'll just ask Crystal to open one of the links because I want to go through it with you. NIH every week, they have a comprehensive database of guides, grants, and contracts. This is something that is regularly available to everyone. It's a lot of activities. It lists all the active funding opportunities. They sort it by institute and by R-type, meaning whether it's a training grant, it's a research grant, it's a fellowship grant. But what NIH does is that every week they distribute what's called a weekly funding guide. And that basically they curate all the new opportunities. They also include information on if there's a change in the goal of the funding opportunities. They list general notices. And this is something that all of you can subscribe to. It's not limited to like just research office staff, etc. I also recommend that you also bookmark the NIH COVID-19 information page. All the information that I have listed in this presentation came from that page. So that page, they talk about any changes to the FOAs, if there are extensions, any COVID-19 specific information, any information that will be applicable to your research. If you're talking about human subjects, everything is listed there. And then the last one is the NIH extramural news updates. That is very good as well because Dr. Mike Lauer, I think his name is, if I remember correctly, he does a really good job of sending out weekly tips, weekly updates on all things related to NIH, whether it's grant submissions, contract submissions, and since the COVID pandemic, they have had an extra focus on that. So the key takeaways for you today is number one, NIH has a significant amount of funding opportunities for faculty, but we also have other agencies outside of the National Institute of Health, specifically NSF, DOD, DOE, and several foundations that have opportunities that are interdisciplinary in nature. Two, it's very important to subscribe to the weekly newsletter, because that will give you all the opportunities that are available at the NIH, and it will keep you informed of if there are any changes. Three, if the RCMI, which is a wonderful resource for the entire university, especially in terms of their leadership in health science and biomedical research. And they have expanded to include a lot of areas on social science research, etc. So I would recommend that you subscribe to the listserv, you follow up with the organizers of this event, follow up with Dr. Carla Williams, Dr. Carter Nolan, Dr. Dexter Lee, to make sure you're aware of all the great professional development opportunities that they have available on a regular basis. And I think that is the last slide. Crystal, do you mind pulling up the page that says NIH COVID-19 information, just really quickly?
Yes, 1 second.
Thanks. I just want to run through that. Right. So as I said, and just scroll down a little bit. So this page should be like your Bible from my perspective in terms of NIH, because it covers all the guidance, it covers all the funding opportunities, it provides the links to everything that I provided on the slides or here. So if you look in the area that says funding opportunities, once you click on that, it will take you to all the funding opportunities. Could you scroll down a little bit, Crystal? Thanks. Any updates in terms of proposal, submission, and award management, they provide that. Keep going. Keep going. Right here. Human subjects and trials, if there are any updates to that, they talk about it. If you're doing animal studies, if you want to learn more about peer review, which is very important, if you're submitting a proposal, they have all the updates there. And then in addition, they have, if you have the funding opportunities specific to COVID, that's the link there. The Open Mic blog is the blog that I was referring to from the Office of Extramural Education. And then the area that says funded grants, that is a link that would take you to specific, not just NIH funded grants. Like I said, they've curated a list of all the COVID-19 supplements and special awards that have been funded since March 2020. So like I said, if you're applying for a grant, it's always important that you know what has been funded. You see the study sections, you get to review, and you could even sometimes contact the person who has been funded to get feedback, etc. And then they also have a link of all general resources. So if there's one page that you should favorite or bookmark from this presentation, it should be this page, because it has all the information that you need to know in terms from a comprehensive standpoint about NIH funding in general, but also specific to COVID-19. Thanks. Thank you, Crystal. So that's it for me. I don't know if anyone.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Clark and Dr. Williams. Do we have any questions from our participants? I know there's a question regarding the slides, if they can be shared, and we will see if the slides can be shared with the participants. So I don't think that will be a problem. Do we have any additional questions? I'm looking in the chat. No questions in the chat. Okay.
I think the comment by Dr. Williams and Dr. Johnson about mentoring and how junior investigators can be, I guess, consumed by team science was very important, and definitely will be followed up on with in greater detail, because oftentimes team science is a way for individuals to connect to some form of active research when there may be little or to no activity of their own. So I guess the take home message is team science is important, but should not be the only science that we're doing.
Okay. I see a thumbs up from Dr. Williams, so she agrees. All right. Well, if there are no questions, I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for joining us for this week's seminar series. I think we have exposed you to some of the hidden pillars at Howard University, and I say that with all due respect because these are two women that work very hard for the university, and they are definitely in the background doing the work. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Dr. Lee, do you have anything to add?
No, I would like to thank Dr. Williams and Ms. Clark for an excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and continue to stay safe. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.